Hello and welcome to the Daily Brief Show by Zerodha. On this show, we cut through the noise and simplify the biggest stories and trends that are shaping the markets. I'm your host Anurag Bansal. Today is Tuesday, the 3rd of September, and I have three big stories for you. By the way, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you consume your podcasts. And if you like reading instead of watching or listening, you can also consider subscribing to our No Spam newsletter for a very quick rundown every morning. You can find all the links in the description below. So let's start with the stories. In the first story today, I talk about Reliance's recent AGM and the announcements that they made in it. In the second story, I discuss the automobile sector's inventory problem and what's really happening there. And in the third story, I talk about the oil crisis in Libya that might affect India and the rest of the world. So let's begin with the first story. Look, as you might already know, Reliance is one of India's largest industrial conglomerates. It has a market cap of over 20 lakh crore rupees and they hold about 9% weightage in Nifty 50. The company's business is incredibly vast. They span oil and gas to retail, telecommunications, and even new energy. Across all its businesses, Reliance had 9.3 lakh crore rupees in sales and 77,000 crore rupees in profits last year. Reliance's massive size and just presence means that any change in its business has a ripple effect across the entire Indian economy. They recently did an annual general meeting or AGM, and there were some very interesting insights that I would like to talk to you about. Let's dive into each segment and highlight the key points from the AGM. Let's start with oil to chemicals or O2C, which is Reliance's most profitable business. The O2C segment this year as well remains the biggest revenue generator, but it is adapting to a changing world. Oil producers and refiners are operating in a world where they are coming under pressure to reduce emissions by moving away from fossil fuel based activities. Government-owned refiners like Indian Oil, Bharat Petroleum, and Hindustan Petroleum are making significant investments in petrochemicals to move away from low-margin oil refining business. And Reliance also seems to be following the same path. The company processed 60 variants of crude oil last year at a time when crude prices have been incredibly volatile. Reliance is expanding into specialty chemicals like PVC, which are crucial for India's growing construction sector. This also aligns with the government's focus on self-sustainability and infrastructure development. Very visibly, sustainability is becoming a core focus for Reliance. Reliance now recycles 2 billion plastic bottles annually, aiming for 5 billion next year. And despite global pressure to reduce fossil fuel use, Reliance is finding ways to make its O2C business relevant for the future. This includes investing in advanced technologies and exploring more efficient production methods. Moving on, let's talk about Reliance Retail, which is operating in a very interesting environment. On one hand, you have a rising class of mass affluent Indians with the ability to spend. This is accompanied by the trend of premiumization and rapid penetration of digital payments. And on the other hand, there is the rise of quick commerce and the promise of instant convenience. Coincidentally, Reliance Retail is also dipping its toes now in quick commerce. It is in this very environment that Reliance Retail is operating 18,000 physical stores. Also, Reliance is entering the jewelry segment now, which very recently Birla entered with Indriya. Reliance is also looking to blend online and offline shopping experiences very similar to Amazon's approach. But they're doing this with a vast network of physical stores. By partnering with 4 million small shops, Reliance is turning potential competitors into their allies. The main big highlight over here was that they aim to double their revenue in the next 3 to 4 years. This means they have very aggressive expansion plans. Moving on, let's talk about Reliance's digital services and Jio. Look, the Indian telecom sector has undergone a massive shift in the past decade, and this is largely due to the disruptive entry of Reliance Jio in 2016, where they offered dirt cheap 4G data plans. For your context, in 2018, Vodafone was the market leader and they commanded a 35 to 40% share in mobile subscribers. But fast forward to today, Vodafone's market share has absolutely plummeted and it is less than 20% today, all thanks to Jio. After years of intense competition and massive investments in infrastructure, particularly 5G networks, telecom operators are now focusing on increasing their profitability. Reliance Jio recently took the lead in increasing tariffs. Vodafone and Airtel also quickly followed, and they signaled a wide industry shift towards boosting average revenue per user or ARPU. Just last month, ratings agency CRISIL projected that the ARPU of the industry is set to reach 225 rupees from the current 182 rupees. Now, higher ARPUs are very crucial for recovering and sustaining the massive investments that are required for expanding and upgrading network infrastructure, especially as India races to roll out their 5G services nationwide. Reliance has also now transformed from a disruptive telecom upstart to a comprehensive digital services provider with ambitions that extend far beyond traditional telecom services. Coming to the highlights, Jio now has 490 million subscribers with its network handling 8% of global internet traffic. The company also completed India's fastest 5G rollout with 130 million 5G users already. Also, recent tariff increases aim to boost average revenue per user, as I already mentioned, which is a very key metric for telecom profitability. Also, Jio is now looking to expand beyond mobile services into the home broadband and business solution space as well. Reliance also in this AGM introduced something called the Jio Brain, which shows Jio's ambition to be a leader in AI services, not just a network provider. Moving on to the new energy segment of Reliance's business, as the world tries to move away from fossil fuels towards more sustainable forms of energy, Reliance also does not want to be left far behind. There is a global push for cleaner and more renewable energy sources, and Reliance is very much there. And to make use of this big opportunity, Reliance is now making a bold move into the renewable energy sector. Even Adani's company, which is another major Indian conglomerate, has entered this sector and established significant presence in solar and wind. Now, as per Reliance's big move in renewable energy, they plan to start making solar panels this year, reducing India's reliance on imports specifically from China. We spoke about in one of our episodes titled "Why is China Dumping Everything Everywhere?" Also, a large battery factory is being built which could support India's electric vehicle ambitions. Right now, China has pretty much the entire battery market and they produce more than 75% of the world's EV batteries. Reliance is also investing in green hydrogen, which is seen as a potential replacement for fossil fuels in industries like steel making. Reliance aims for this new segment to match its oil business in profitability within just the next 5 to 7 years, which is a very, very ambitious goal. Moving on, let's talk about the oil and gas exploration and production industry of Reliance. Look, while this is currently very small, this segment is growing significantly. Reliance's KG D6 field or Krishna Godavari Dhirubhai 6 is a deep water natural gas field located off the eastern coast of India in the Bay of Bengal. This now produces 30% of India's natural gas. This means Reliance has become a major player in domestic energy production, which enhances India's energy security and reduces dependency on gas imports. Reliance is also now using new drilling techniques in order to extract more gas, which potentially could unlock more domestic energy sources. Moving on to the next story of the day, let's talk about auto manufacturers versus auto dealers. Look, selling automobiles is a very tricky business. One element that makes it really tricky is inventory management, which in very simple words is the number of vehicles stored in a warehouse and are ready to be sold. Inventory optimization is very crucial because automobile dealers and manufacturers need to pay a hefty amount for storage space. They also incur costs to finance these vehicles sitting in their warehouses before they are sold, and needless to say, there is also depreciation on the vehicles lying around unsold. Today, India's automobile industry is struggling with a very high inventory problem. There is high stock and low demand. Passenger vehicle sales are expected to fall by 6 to 8% year on year, according to an estimate by Motilal Oswal. Excluding two-wheelers, sales remain weak across the board. Strangely and funnily though, the severity of this inventory problem is being debated between auto manufacturers and auto dealers. The Federation of Automobile Dealers Association or FADA says that the current automobile inventory is about 70 days, which by the way is pretty high. On the other hand, the Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers or SIAM estimates this number to be just 38 days. Now, who's wrong here and who's right is very difficult to predict. The reason why there is such a stark difference between these inventory estimates is because both associations calculate this inventory number very differently. Automobile manufacturers calculate by counting the number of cars they make, while on the other hand, auto dealers counted by using sales data and registration information. Now, ideally speaking, these numbers should still be similar, but that is not quite the case. My personal guess is that auto manufacturers are trying to downplay the number to keep the market sentiment positive, while dealers are amplifying it in order to safeguard themselves from being forced to take on more vehicles than what they can sell. But like I said, who's right and who's wrong is very, very difficult to judge. What is very well known though is that irrespective of the real number, there is an inventory problem in the automobile sector today. Take for example Mahindra and Mahindra. In their April con call, they said that the waiting period for some of their models was more than 2 to 3 months. But if you look at the reality today, this waiting period has come down to as low as 2 to 3 days. To clear up inventory and promote sales today, automobile companies and dealers are offering deep discounts and schemes to the extent that they would normally never would. For Maruti, discounts have declined 10% month on month for the Arena channel, but have increased 5 to 7% month on month for the Nexa channel. Tata went on to increase its discounts to 20,000 rupees from 10,000 rupees last month on its best-selling compact SUV, the Punch. Tata's other model, Nexon, continues to see a discount of up to 1 lakh rupee on some of its variants, according to the same Motilal report that I referred to earlier. From the dealer's perspectives, though, it makes a lot of sense. If you assume there are about 7 lakh unsold cars lying around, dealers are losing crores per month just to hold them in their warehouses. By any stretch of imagination, that is a lot of money to lose, and hence deep discounting does make sense. But that said, it is not like dealers cannot hold inventory. As an industry practice, most dealers can sustainably hold inventories of 30 to 45 days around the festive season, like the one we are heading into now, and that is because they anticipate great sales during this time. But this year, inventory levels have exceeded 2.5 to 3 months, which, as I explained earlier, is causing a lot of problems. As a proposed solution, the FADA or the Dealers Association has written to SIAM or the Manufacturers Association twice in the last 2 months. Their ask is that automakers reduce the number of vehicles they send to dealerships in order to align with weak demand. In addition, the FADA is also pushing for the continuation of the FAME 3 policy to boost demand for EVs. FAME policies, by the way, are subsidies and incentives provided by the Government of India to promote the adoption of EVs in the country. The FADA is also calling for a reduction in GST on entry-level passenger cars and two-wheelers from the current rate of 28% in order to make these vehicles more accessible. Until then, though, the automotive industry is hopeful that the festive season will bring some relief to the current low demand situation. It'll be very interesting to see how this sector shapes up and deals with the problem over the next few months or so. I'll cover this further as and when there are more updates. Moving on, let's talk about the global oil markets. Look, crude prices are once again in focus, and this time it is because of some drama unfolding in Libya. For your context, Libya has been in a constant state of war ever since its longtime leader Muammar Gaddafi was deposed by a US-led military operation supported by NATO allies like France and the UK. Now, why does this matter? That is because Libya is home to Africa's largest proven oil reserves, and they produce about 1 million barrels of oil per day. Right now, over 60% of this production has stopped and more supply is at risk. To put this into some perspective, the world consumes over 100 million barrels of crude every day, and even small disruptions here are enough to move prices significantly. And talking about India, we import over 80% of our oil, so any fluctuations in the global oil market can have a very significant impact on our entire economy. Let me break down what is happening here exactly. Look, after Gaddafi was overthrown in 2011, numerous parties have been fighting for power in Libya. Despite the United Nations' best efforts, peace has been unattainable with regular outbursts of violence. More often than not, the parties fighting to take control of Libya have taken oil fields as hostage, and that is exactly what is happening right now as well. The latest drama began when Prime Minister Abdul Hamid's internationally recognized government in the West tried to dismiss Sadiq al-Kabir, the governor of the Libyan central bank. Al-Kabir is being accused of mismanagement and excessive spending. Reports suggest that the central bank governor has now fled the country due to threats and harassment. In response, the Eastern government, led by Prime Minister Osama Hamad and supported by other military leaders, has closed oil fields crucial to Libya's economy. They are demanding Al-Kabi's restoration. Now, the interesting part is that the Central Bank of Libya receives all the money from the country's oil production and allocates it to various other areas. This has become a major point of contention for the various factions that want a piece of the pie. Now, all of this latest disruption comes at a very interesting time for oil prices. I'll explain. Look, after a brief spike, Brent crude was down to about 77 US dollars and WTI crude to $73, which is weird, right? You'd expect prices to go up when supply is disrupted. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. The demand for crude has been really weak this year, which is largely due to a slowdown in the Chinese economy. Crude demand has been weak despite the fact that the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, has been keeping close to 6 million barrels of supply off the market. Another reason for low crude prices is reports that OPEC might start unwinding some of those supply cuts in October. Roughly 2.2 million barrels of crude could enter the market at that point in time. So far, though, crude prices have stayed relatively stable, and that is why our fuel bills have not yet skyrocketed. But it is crazy to think about the number of disruptions to crude supply we have had in just the last few years, from the Russian invasion of Ukraine to conflicts in the Middle East and now this situation in Libya. The global oil markets remain unpredictable, and we'll have to watch how this Libyan crisis unfolds in the coming few weeks. That's all the news and stories I have for you today. I hope you found value in this episode. I'll see you tomorrow. Take care and goodbye.